I'm Mike Vardy.
Meal planning is important because it prevents us from being a disappointed wreck when dinner time comes around and we have no clue what to make, or even if we have the ingredients to make the meal. It's a time and a money saver, but most importantly, it frees up valuable brain space. Creating a meal plan prepares us for the week to come and gives us peace of mind that we're organized and can feed ourselves and our family. That's why I do it, and that's why Plan to Eat helps me do it. Your subscription includes access to the Plan to Eat website and fully featured mobile apps on iOS and Android. And Plan to Eat gives you the tools to clip and organize recipes from any website, the ones your family loves and that fit your dietary preferences and needs. And you can create a meal plan around your schedule. Then what happens is the Plan to Eat software automatically creates an organized shopping list based on your plan. So sign up for your free trial at plantoeat.com/timecrafting. That's plantoeat.com/timecrafting. The coupon will be automatically applied to your account and can be used when you're ready to subscribe. It's valid for new customers only. Give Plan to Eat a try today.
And this is the Productivityist Podcast. On this episode of the Productivityist Podcast, I talked to Gary Szenderski. He is an author, speaker, teacher, and branding specialist. He's internationally acclaimed as an expert on the subject. He's an award-winning writer. He's often quoted as a marketing expert and a recipient of the Distinguished Instructor Award from the University of California in Irvine, where he teaches branding. He resides in Southern California, and that's where he joins me from today as we talk about the idea of change and getting into what he calls the Szen Zone. More on that as we progress through my conversation with Gary Szenderski here on the Productivityist Podcast. I'm feeling rather zen today. And so on this episode of the show, we've got Gary Szenderski. He is the author of Szen Zone, Reaching a State of Positive Change. And of course, we have all the links that we're going to have related to this episode in the show notes. But Gary, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
So as we started, I'm like, this is not going to be a typical interview, but I need to know, what is Szen Zone? Like, how do you define that? Because a lot of people are going to, they're going to listen to this and go, well, I want to get a sense of what your definition of Zen, especially since it's spelled differently, kind of the way your name is spelled. What is that? What does that mean to you? And maybe what does it mean to others? What's your goal with it?
Right. Okay. So I think I should first explain to your listeners that, it is SZEN. It's not, and those are the first four letters of my name. And so I took a creative license with that. I also have another book called The Book of Zen.
Yeah.
So that's that. But the Szen Zone, in terms of what is in the book, is that spot where you kind of are able to determine not only what you want to do, but how you're going to try to get there. And those are really two important components of change. The first being the primary, which is you can't get what you want until you know what you want. So the book spends a lot of time with that. But the Szen Zone is that launch pad area where you get into your head and you've got it, and you're locked in and you want to go.
I want to talk about one aspect of change that really puts people off. And it may kind of compel them to stay where they are and not explore what they really want to do. And it's fear. And you talk about fear and will in this, in the introductory components of the book. Can you dive a little bit into the idea of where fear can play a role in the aspects of change?
Yeah. In fact, I think, to me, fear is the biggest setback we all have on everything. And when it comes to change, especially, because nobody likes to really change, and yet it's the one constant in the universe. So fear is, us projecting basically an outcome that we have no idea whether it's going to happen or not. So we get afraid of a conclusion, like we might fail. We choose not to go because we've already figured it out in our head that it's not going to work out, and that just stops us. And it's much easier just to stay in that spot and not move, unfortunately.
So I'm a big proponent of willpower and of using that as a catalyst. And I think fear, like you said, it keeps people stagnant. But I want to talk about when it comes to productivity as well. You've got an entire chapter related to what's called the productivity promise. Now, I mean, I've heard about guarantees and all that stuff, and I talk about productivity a lot. What is the productivity promise? What is that aspect of that you're willing to share with people that is that guarantee or that promise that is going to help them make those internal changes, and use their time better? What can we dive into that a little bit?
Sure. I think, it's not rocket science. I don't think the book is pretty simple, but one thing about productivity versus, willpower, as a point is productivity is action. And the thing about, making yourself get more out of life is you gotta do more with the life you have. And so the stories in that section of the book really dwell on, taking those baby steps, even if they're little ones, to get to where you want to go. And that helps you kind of get more done. It also helps you kind of organize your thinking. And a lot of times we can't get anything accomplished because we've got so many things on our plate that we're distracted by all the other pieces. The most common one is trying to write a letter when you've got your email on. It's like 10 interruptions every 5 seconds, and there's nobody that's going to have any concentration. So we do it to ourselves. We want to stay connected, and so those are the kinds of things that inhibit us. And so the promise is really like, okay, let's get some of those distractions out of there. The guy wrote a great book called The Happiness Advantage, a guy named professor from Harvard, Sean Anker.
Yep.
And he talks a lot about that. I really love his stuff, about how they do a lot of research, and they show they just turn off the email and you'll be 10 times more productive than you were the day before. So it's that kind of stuff that I think is of interest.
One of the things you dive into, and I've talked about this before, is the idea of harnessing the power of the weekend. I think a lot of people, and this might fly in the face of Zen in a lot of ways, because a lot of people, what they want to do is take those weekends and just not do anything, or they don't want to map them out. They just want to go home, take the weekend and relax, recharge, and then just get back on that wheel come Monday morning. I want to talk about the idea of harnessing the power of your weekends. What do you recommend people do with their weekend time so that they can, put that positive change into action?
Well, I know out there everybody's a little bit different, and if they're listening to something about productivity from you, I would guess that they've got a lot to do. And so for me, my example is I work 7 days a week, and it's because I love what I do. It doesn't seem like work to me. And so I tend to just make a list of what I want to accomplish actually particularly on Saturday and Sunday. Every Sunday I write a story, but to answer your question, you just, if you don't put something down to do, at least one thing that you have to get up and go someplace. You got to go to the store, you got to go to Costco, whatever you have to do, and put that in there. And then the other thing I put for me is I call somebody in your family and get engaged outside of your own weekend, because what happens to a lot of folks that I know, they get home on Friday and they're too tired to do anything. They have dinner, and then Saturday morning they maybe have some errands or some chores, but it's not very structured. And so if they could skip one or two, they might. And consequently, those things carry over to the next weekend. And pretty soon you're stressed out when the weekend comes because you've got too much to do.
Let's talk about the structure of the book as a whole, because I'm looking at this, and I mean, I've had the chance to read it, and you talk about the past, the present, and the future, and you dedicate chapters to each of those. Why did you structure the book? Not only, and I want to dive into like how you've assembled the book with, because there's a lot of small chunks to this book, but I want to talk about these 3 chapters in particular. What was the impetus behind saying, okay, I want to focus on, dedicating an entire chapter to the past, to the present, and to the future?
Well, here I have to tell you how I wrote the book, and then you can understand how I ended up doing it that way. They weren't written to be in those chapters. They were random stories that came at different times over like 3-year period that I wrote it. And when we got it all together, we organized them by theme. And that's how it fell together, honestly. And it was the editor that had the idea. And actually, I took some of her notes. I put them at the front end of those chapters to kind of explain, why it worked this way. So the book is totally random in that sense, but thematically they partner with each other and they build off each other. So that's how it got organized that way.
And again, the idea of these are really, really short, I would call them morsels. Like every little essay is kind of like a morsel. It's divided in like little tactical tips. Again, was that deliberate, or is that just kind of how things shook out when it was all said and done? Or is that just how you write?
It's it's mostly how I write. So let me go. This whole idea of writing these books was because I started doing some internal emails to my team. I have a marketing consulting firm, just motivational pieces. They liked them and they started sending them to clients, and pretty soon I had a bunch of people that wanted me to write them. So every Sunday, beginning about 7 or 8 years ago, I started writing these stories. And at the end of like 2 or 3 years, if you write one a week, you got a couple hundred stories. So I started just compiling them to put them into book form. That's all it is. And every Sunday when I write one, and I'm still doing it, I don't know what the subject's going to be till I sit down and start to write it. That's what you're probably seeing, because you're seeing the randomness of it. And my style is to be pretty freeform.
Right. Now let's talk about the Sunday thing, because that's rather interesting. There's some consistency there. You write these every single Sunday. How long have you been doing this for?
I don't know, 7 to 8 years at least.
And are you very much a person that's driven by that routine and ritual of, okay, these are kind of the tentpole activities that I do? Because I noticed that in the book, you've got like, the 60-word stories and the snippets. I guess, is that how you put snippets? Is that how?
Yeah, exactly.
Like a lot of waypoints along the way. Are you very much driven by that sense of having those there so that they kind of act as pillars throughout your process?
Yeah, they're little things to kind of help me, little crutches. The 60-word story is a way for me to write something that it might be of interest to me, and then kind of play off of it. So it gave me some fodder. But basically, I don't stress out about it too much. I sit down on a Sunday afternoon, usually have a glass of wine, and I'll say, okay, what do I want to say this week? And I'll just start writing. And at the end of a half an hour or so, I find that this is therapy for me, incidentally. It's not a lot of stress. So I just really love doing it, because I know there's people out there that are waiting, not that they're waiting to hear, but often they'll say, you were thinking about me today. I know, because you wrote exactly what I needed to hear. And that's again, whatever happened in the week kind of shapes what that story might be. And there's a couple of times where I did a serial, but most of the time it's just one-offs.
Why? It's interesting because as we talk about this, you've got some consistencies, and yet you're fascinated with change. Why are you fascinated with the idea of change, or positive change, or just change in general?
Well, that has to do with my career. I work in advertising and marketing, and I'm a branding specialist, which I teach at the University of California as well. And by luck of the draw, somehow over the years, I found that most of the clients that I worked with were going through some kind of transition. They were going through new product development, brand extension, line extension, something like that. And in that process, there was a human component of change. And I was fascinated, and I worked with a lot of CEOs and owners who, even though they could see the technical aspects and tactical things that they had to do for their company, there was always an emotional component and a believability and a faith, and sometimes a hope that it would be the right decision. And I ended up doing a lot of coaching with those folks and became really engrossed in change. And you probably know, if you go to Amazon, there's a billion books on change, and there's all kinds of aspects to it. But for me, it's the one constant, and it's the one thing that people wrestle with the most. So I'm fascinated by it, and that's why I write about it.
When it comes to change, and I mean, you go through this in the book, obviously try to get into the Szen Zone, is like, what are your recommendations when someone is trying to make those changes? Because a lot of people are, and no matter what time of year it is, but let's focus on, let's say, New Year's resolutions. People are all about I'm going to make a massive change at this time of year, and 9 times out of 10 or 9.9 times out of 10, they fall flat on their face because it's just either not the right time, or maybe again they don't have a clear vision as to it. So what's the first thing somebody should do when they want to incite positive change in their lives?
Well, to use your example on the resolutions, one of the things that we fail with in resolutions is that we make them kind of so broad sometimes that we don't have a plan with it. Like, I want to lose 30 pounds. Well, you have to have 10 other resolutions to go with that. Like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to da-da-da-da. There's a lot of things that add up and lead to that. And you just can't will it. You have to take some time. 28 days is the prescribed plan for your brain to actually start to take what you've been doing and rewire your synapses so they fire in a way that it becomes part of a habit. And that's the way change works. You make it a habit, and it comes to life. But you've got to hang with it. And it's the actions. It's not the thinking. It's not the will. It's the actions that you take that changes your behavior that helps you get through that. If you don't change your behavior, you're pretty much trying to do the same thing. It's just not going to happen. And people get tired of trying to will themselves. So they've got to, the mindset has to go along with it. It has to change that. I like to start with, what do you want to be when you grow up, and then work backwards, kind of reverse engineer, and think with the end in mind. I'm going to be this kind of person and move towards that, because in my world, image is destiny. Whatever you put out there, you can become.
Okay, let's run with that for a little bit. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, that's, I think I wanted to be something in entertainment. And so I gravitated towards actually radio when I was going to school, and did a lot of stuff of the disc jockey and things like that. And I liked being on the stage. It translated into a lot of other things. And actually, by the time I got out of college, I was in marketing and advertising, and I've never changed since then. And I still get to get on stage, and I still do talks. Like, I know you do. You go out and do concerts or lectures, and it's exciting to have people in the audience that are listening and paying attention, can really get it, and hopefully they get something out of it when they walk away and can use it. And you never really know how many times you can touch a person's life, and that's what I really wanted to be. My personal brand is winning perspective. I think there's always a chance, there's always a way to win, and I try to have positive impact with any engagement that I have.
It is interesting. It's notable that I did want to do it. I mean, I was doing comedy and I did radio for a while as well. But it's funny because ultimately I am performing on stage like you, and I get to do these kind of shows, and I get to write, and I get to be creative, but I get to do it in a way that helps people, not just people that are my audience, but my family. Because, I mean, let's face it, earning a living as a stand-up comic in Victoria, British Columbia isn't exactly the most lucrative venture.
Yeah, I could see that.
Let's talk about awareness a little bit, because, I mean, obviously when you're trying to, invite change and affect change, awareness has to be a big part of that. How do you tap into awareness, and how do you suggest others tap into their own self-awareness?
Yeah, self-awareness is it starts with self-discovery. And I think if you start to ask yourself, like, I like to do it this way. I use the metaphor of, like, you're writing a book, and you're at a chapter, and you're the main character in the book, and you want to change and do something in the book that's different. Okay, well, if you were writing this to be logical and methodical, where would that character have to be in their head in order to be able to make that leap in the next chapter? And you kind of write that story out in your mind. It's like, what has to happen? You don't necessarily have to set up every obstacle they're going to face, because that'll stop you in your tracks. But you want to have the mental mindset. What is the character Joe Blow doing on chapter 8 that's going to make him way different in chapter 9. And in that bridge, I think, is the awareness. It's the self-awareness and self-discovery of, I can do this. I got this. I really can turn on a switch. And it's really that simple. Mike, if you change your mind, you change your world. And we have so much power as humans. We forget that we can do it. And awareness is just knowing that you have the power to get there.
And one of the things that happens when we get, when we forget that is we get stuck, right? We don't move anywhere. I mean, you talk about, in the productivity component, you talk about weightless being, using the time that you have and not leaving things waiting. But I want to talk about the idea of getting stuck, because that can happen during the process of change. How do you recommend, or even how do you help people when they get to that part where they've started to make their way through and then they just get stuck and they have a hard time getting out of that state of stuckness, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I think if you have a really good answer for that, I'd love to hear it. But, really getting stuck is, I think, part of life. We just run out of gas. Right. I think that's part of it. And sometimes we're just because we're doing it on our own. If you can rally your family behind you or some colleagues, and you have a joint venture, or you can somehow collaborate on something, you can create the energy that maybe you can get over that finish line. Because sometimes change is right around the corner. You think it's not happening. You've been trying, but it's that bud that's just ready to pop out of the ground and blossom. That you might just be really close to it if you just hung on there a little bit. And then what happens is the stuckness comes from our lack of belief that we're going to get there. Because faith drives all of this stuff internally. And then we think, okay, I'm too tired, I can't make it. And we get some doubt. Doubt is stuckness, if that's a way to say it.
Yeah. It's
the doubt that says, oh, I can't. I'm just, somebody's going to have to drag me across the finish line because this isn't happening.
What about negative change? Because that can happen too when you're stuck. The polarity of this, of going in the opposite direction, of doing something negative, can rear its ugly head. How do you handle that? What are some tactics that people can employ to kind of say, okay, hold on a second, I can feel myself not stuck anymore, but I'm slipping into a place I really don't want to be?
Yeah, getting into negativity is boy, that could be a real death spiral. I think there's two things. Negative change is something that maybe happens to you that you couldn't control. Something, a loss, the stock market. I mean, things like that just changed your life. The only thing you have left in the face of that is to change your perspective on how you view it. If you go, oh, what was me? I'm going to die. Well, then that's what's going to happen. You have to be able to kind of re-engage and maybe recalibrate. But when you start to slip into negativity and despair is kind of too much of a strong word, but you start to see the world in a negative sense, you're not ever going to get anywhere. Everything's going to just drag you down. And believe me, if you think people are out to get you, they'll be lining up. I mean, that's just the way it goes. So, and that's a tough one. I know some people that have suffered through depression, and it's hard. Thankfully, there's medications that people can take now, but it's a bad place to be. And I get a lot of readers that sometimes slip into that. They get bummed out. You got to change your attitude. That's the only way to do it.
As we get close to wrapping up here, I want to dive a little bit into the idea of the fact Szen Zone. Like a zone is a structure. It's a place. It's a state, right? How vital is having a structure to allow yourself to get into that state? Like, I know a lot of people, when they're dealing with creativity and change, is they want freedom. A lot of, the freedom to move, the freedom to breathe. But I'm a big believer that, frameworks foster freedom. How important is it, for you and for those that you help to say, hey, look, we're putting change in place, but here is the framework that you need. Here's, maybe not a 12-step program, but here's some boundaries, here's some frameworks that you need to put in place so that when stuckness happens, when you start to slide, you're not going to slide or veer as far off course as you might otherwise.
Yeah, I think people that gets into the hows, which
Right.
some people are really good at. I'm not so good at it. So I like to just stay focused on the goal, and I don't really figure out how I'm going to get there. And that's more of a laissez-faire, free-form kind of way to go.
But you do have you do have pillars, though. Like you do have some. I mean, you have that Sunday writing ritual, and you have your kind of your staple writing process. So you do have them there, but they're just a bit. They're not as let's say rigid as everyone's going to have their own level of rigidity, I guess.
That's exactly the point. I think there's like four basic personality types. I'm a driver type. I'm a goal-oriented person, and I have some expressive in me too, like I think you do. But I think analytical people that really are in the process, they build these bridges. They engineer their lives a step at a time with all kinds of framework and all kinds of ways to get there. And it's like climbing up a wall in a gym, where there's these little things you can latch onto that are all there kind of logically for you to reach. Some folks just want to jump on a trampoline and get to the top, It's different for everybody. You have to find what works for you. And the way to know if it works is to think of something that you want to happen and then make it happen. And however you did it, do it again. It's that. I think it's pretty simple.
So how do you map out a goal? I mean, which is interesting because we just said, well, that's more of the how, but you obviously have goals. You have ideas. You have things you want to see go from, idea to reality. When you sit down, like when you're sitting down, no matter what time of year, I'm not a big. There is a time of year where I think planning is something that people do more of rather than less of. But when you how does that ideation to action process look like for you?
Well, I can answer that question because I still practice this. I try to put things into my thinking by trying to visualize them in some ways, or take a step towards it. Years ago, when we had an advertising firm and marketing firm. There's about 14 of us, and we had offices in France and Spain and different places. And my partner spoke 5 languages, and fluent French was one of them. And so she always got the best gigs to go to Europe and handle the business there. And I just kept on saying to myself, I'm going to do this. So I took a baby step. I took some French lessons, and I had taken it in college, and I started to practice. And after 2 weeks of doing this, I mean, swear to God, I got a call from CBS Radio, and that we've been advertising on their networks. And they said, you spent a lot of money with us. We're giving you 4 all expenses paid for a week in the south of France. I go, oh, okay. I'd never been there, but I made that move. And in my world, and what I write about in Szen Zone, is that if you go towards something, it will come towards you. And it's not my law; it's some law of the universe that happens. And that's the power we have as being creators. Is that we can create anything we want. Nothing happens without an idea or a thought. And we're full of thoughts all the time. We just want to have the right ones.
Gary, I'm after going through this book, having a chance to talk to you. I mean, what I love about this book is it's short, actionable. It's like, noticing. It's a lot of noticing. I mean, when I was reading this, the work of Seth Godin came to mind. Short snippets but very insightful. And I'm a sucker for portmanteaus. Productivityist is one. So seeing things like Zenabling and confidence and things like that, like, all right. So it's a very this book, Szen Zone, Reaching a State of Positive Change, is what I would call a very accessible read. And it's one of those books where you'll sit where you'll have it in. There's very few books that I would say that fall into this category in this space, but the one that you would have that you could return to again and again and get something out of it. A great example would be outside of this realm is I was watching Arrested Development recently again, that great TV series, which actually takes place in Orange County. And I watched it again after a couple years of not watching it. And there were jokes that I missed the first time, and the repeat value was excellent. this is, and the irony is that, Arrested Development has absolutely nothing to do with change other than it's not having any change happen at all. But if you get a chance, and I highly recommend picking up Szen Zone, the links will be in the show notes. Gary, thanks so much for joining me today. I really had a great time chatting with you, and there was a lot to unpack in this episode. So I encourage everybody to give it another listen, because there was a lot of great gold in this episode. So thanks, Gary, for being part of the show today.
Thank you, Mike. It's been my pleasure.
I had a blast talking with Gary. There was a lot of great stuff in there, and I hope that you get a chance to check out the show notes. And if you don't get a chance, you should make the time to check out the show notes, as well as pick up his book, Szen Zone, and his other book, The Book of Zen, which we talk about more in a bonus episode exclusive to supporters of the podcast. Head over to patreon.com/productivityist to learn more about that, because for as little as $1 a month, you can get bonus content and a whole bunch of other great perks along the way. Again, patreon.com/productivityist to learn more about that. Now, if you are not able to support the show as a patron, perhaps you could offer a review or a rating in iTunes. So that way we can learn how to make the show better, and it can help people discover the show and all that stuff. Because my producer, John Polster, and I, we check out these reviews, and we take that advice, we take that feedback, and we use it. So again, if you're not able to support as a patron, I'd love to get a rating or review in iTunes or wherever you are listening to this podcast. I hope you'll be back next week. I really enjoyed having you here, and I enjoyed having Gary on the show as well. I enjoy working with John Polstro, my producer, who puts together all of these episodes, and thanks to my team who helps to put all the show notes and everything together to make this show happen week in and week out. Until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of the Productivityist podcast, reminding you to stop guessing and start going.